I just tried Fallout 4 for the very first time this week. I streamed around 10 hours of it live with chat and spent another 5 offline, just trying to form a more complete opinion. I debated not making a video at all, not out of dislike, but because I struggled to form any strong feelings. That, more than anything, is what pushed me to make this, because that weird absence of feeling is what I want to talk about. Fallout 4 didn't anger me or excite me. It just existed. And for an RPG, that's an incredibly strange experience, because role-playing games are built to make you feel something. If I were to slot this game into a tier list of every Bethesda title I've tried on this channel, Fallout 4 would land comfortably in the average tier. I choose the word average or mediocre carefully. Fallout 4 isn't a bad game, but in my opinion, it's not a great game either. It functions perfectly fine on the surface, but it lacks the narrative and emotional soul that gives a great RPG its momentum. We all have experience playing games where you're disengaged. Not in a frustrating way. In fact, a lot of us enjoy that brain-off gameplay loop. Games where you don't have to pay attention to enjoy the core values presented. Fallout 4 is the first RPG I've ever played to make me feel this way, which I think goes against the values an RPG is generally trying to provide. These games want you to be engaged. They want you to be interested in the story, the world, the atmosphere. There's a certain kind of mediocrity that's more memorable than disaster, and this is it. Fallout 4 didn't crash and burn for me because it never took off. A question I kept asking myself during the main story was, who cares? Your first and only motivation is finding your son. The loss of a friend or family member is a great motivator for the player, if executed correctly. But Fallout 4 presents that loss in such a rushed, awkward way that the only reason you care is out of basic human decency. We can all understand how horrible it would be to watch your wife get shot in the head and your son stolen from her arms, right? That would be awful, but that's all we're really given. I found Fallout 4's writing requires the player to do all the emotional heavy lifting. Instead of spending more time with these characters or providing flashbacks as you progress through the world, the game just hopes you care. It hopes you care about your son enough to continue the main quest because it doesn't provide anything else. It's almost like a guilt trip. I should probably look for my son, not because I want to, but because it's the right thing to do. Unlike Fallout 3, which had a similar father-son dynamic, in that game, you spend the first 30 minutes or so getting to know your family before you're separated. This generates a natural feeling of empathy, but more specifically, a time pressure. You know your dad's in trouble right now. But with Fallout 4, that's not there. Because of that lack of empathy and irrelevance of time, I got sidetracked super easily. Your son was taken from the cryo chamber a while ago. I don't know what the ending for this game is, but I can predict he's either dead or just a dude living in society. I was going to find my son. Eventually. But I wanted to do other stuff first. There was no emotional weight driving me forward. Of the 15 hours I played, only 3 of them were spent on the main story, 20%. The other 80% was side content and exploration. Now, I come from Elder Scrolls. Those games are chock full of dungeons, side quests, and content to dive into. I understand Fallout is set in a nuclear post-apocalyptic society, but compared to Elder Scrolls, it's goddamn empty. These games might have a similar number of points of interest, but there's generally jack shit to do in them. If you're exploring and walk up to a town, you'll find 75% of the buildings boarded up and inaccessible, anti-exploration. If you see a point of interest on your horizon, odds are there's no real reason to check it out. In Fallout 4, most of these POIs feel like an experience vending machine. You spend ammo and medical supplies for XP. No world building, no story progression, just brain off, shoot 'em up gameplay. Again, I don't mind that gameplay loop when it's done well. I 100%ed all of Cyberpunk's base game map, but it feeds into my original point. Fallout 4 isn't the worst open world I've ever played, but it didn't make me want to explore it. I'm sure there are some great dungeons and quests out there, but the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I eventually just told my chat to tell me which ones were good. I did a few dungeons, if that's even the right term, and the best was probably Pikmin Gallery, but again, I had to be directed there. To its credit, Fallout 4 is an excellent first-person shooter. In fact, it's the best combat experience I've had in any of the 3 Fallout games I've tried. Gunfights are punchy and responsive with a satisfying rhythm. There's an impressive range of weapon types and armor classes, all of which can be customized through a deep yet approachable modding system. The gear crafting mechanics strike a strong balance between complexity and usability. In fact, the replayability and customization of your loadout might be the best I've seen in any Bethesda title. But because these systems are so robust, Fallout 4 sometimes feels more like an FPS looter shooter than an RPG. The emphasis on scavenging, deconstructing, and upgrading gear becomes a dominant gameplay loop. Honestly, from my first 15 hours, that loop felt more prominent than the actual questing. You begin to take direct notice in your character's decline in power the longer you neglect these systems. Yes, you can find legendary items in the world, but without upgrades they fall off quite quickly. The previously bland points of interest I mentioned are still bland, but they take on new value when viewed as scrap farms, ways to get new material. Bethesda didn't need to incentivize exploration with meaningful content. They knew the players would explore anyway just to fuel their upgrades. In that way, the game's exploration leans into mechanical obligation rather than narrative desire. This circles back to my original point. Fallout 4 trims away at traditional RPG values by shifting the burden to the player. They didn't need to write a compelling story because they'd assumed you'd care. They didn't need to build a world worth exploring because they knew you'd strip it for parts. The game's strongest systems feel like activities, not adventures. I wasn't doing things because I wanted to, I was doing them because I had to. However, despite that statement, there were a few bright spots that stood out during my playthrough because they felt truly optional. I did a handful of faction quests, the kind of content you have to choose to engage with. These questlines need to spark curiosity or interest, otherwise most players simply won't bother. Of the 4 major factions in this game, I ended up doing quests for 3 of them, and I enjoyed exploring their dynamics. They gave me a reason to pay attention, even if the main story didn't. I also have to say, Fallout 4's companion system might be the best I've experienced in any RPG. I picked up a few optional companions, but the standout was Nick Valentine. Maybe it's because he's tied into the main questline, but the depth of this character's writing was impressive. He'd occasionally interject with lore, pull me aside for conversations, or comment organically on my surroundings. It felt natural, and it gave the world a rare moment of weight and authenticity that I hadn't really experienced elsewhere in the game. The dialogue system, though, doesn't meet that same bar. Gone is the text-rich, skill-checked variety of previous Fallout games. What we have instead is a 4-button wheel with vague emotional tones like sarcastic, inquisitive, or mean, which can often misrepresent what your character will actually say. It strips away the clarity and depth that made Fallout's dialogue feel reactive and responsive, at least to me. Instead of crafting your character's voice, you're left guessing on which version of the line they're about to say, and hoping it lands the way you intended. The perk and progression system, too, feels like a missed opportunity, and that's coming from a Skyrim player. While it's presented in a flashy new chart, it lacks the depth and nuance that the previous Fallout titles offered. In the older games, I loved the unique perks that could define your build and give your character personality or completely different gameplay paths. In Fallout 4, the leveling system feels like they didn't want to take any risks and play it safe off of the success of Skyrim, and I think that was a mistake. The progression becomes linear and more like a checklist rather than a creative opportunity to enhance your playstyle. Fallout's perk and progression system is one thing I think it does way better than the Elder Scrolls. However, the joy of crafting a weird or specialized build is largely gone in Fallout 4. Instead, you're mostly dumping points into stat boosts and generic utility. It's functional, sure, but uninspiring. Not the worst perk system I've ever used, but not the best either. Just generally middle of the road. So, where does that leave me? Fallout 4 isn't a bad game. In many ways, it's mechanically strong, perhaps the strongest Bethesda has ever been on the combat and customization front, but it's also missing something harder to define: the heart. It goes through the motions of an RPG without offering the narrative spark that gives these motions purpose. All the pieces of the puzzle are here, but they don't quite connect into something memorable. Perhaps that's why I've heard such excitement and praise around projects like Fallout London, games that build on Fallout 4's strong foundation, but add back the heart and narrative depth. Fallout 4 has great bones, it really does, but for me, some of the soul got left behind. This game feels much closer to something like Far Cry, which I enjoy, but I'd never call those story-driven experiences. They're exactly what I think Fallout 4 is: a chill, brain-off, open-world looter shooter with optional questing if you choose to do it. But the core fundamentals of the game do not require explicit attention or focus, as the gameplay loops more revolve around the FPS and combat aspect. After 15 hours, I don't feel a burning urge to go back. Not because I hated it, but because I don't feel like I left anything behind. There's no mystery I'm dying to unravel, no character I'm desperate to check in on. I've sampled what the game offers, and for me, that sample was enough. Fallout 4 isn't something I regret playing, but it's not something I'll miss either. This video is a bit of a short one and in a different style compared to what I normally do, so let me know what you think of it. The theme leans a little heavier into a retrospective reflection rather than a documentary style I normally do, where I follow and commentate over my character's exact journey. I'm going to keep Fallout 4 installed, for now. There could be a situation in the future where I give the game a second chance, and speaking of, I know people are curious about New Vegas. I tried that game once, it exploded my computer, and I uninstalled it. But in that video, I said if we hit 5,000 likes, I would try it again with the Viva New Vegas mod pack, and I'm a man of my word. I have Viva installed and functional, so I'll give New Vegas one last shot. Huge thank you to my members who make these videos possible. If you'd like to have early access to my content, exclusive polls to decide on what videos I make next, or just want to support me, being a member is a great way to do that. It's completely unnecessary, but I appreciate it all the more. Thank you so much for watching this video. The next Fallout content you see from me will be New Vegas, so I hope to see you in the next one.